Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. I hope you're having a good week so far. I know some people might be celebrating a short week. I know a lot of companies are doing this Juneteenth thing to celebrate diversity and a lot of the racial injustice going on. So maybe it's a short week for you. So thanks for taking the time to level up with us today. Very excited for this conversation. It's going to be a fun one. And before I do make my introductions to our guests, I wanted to quickly do some housekeeping as everyone's kind of trickling in here. I know this is a big one. We almost had 1,000 people register, so we'll wait a little bit for everyone to get online. But number one, these are all recorded. So if you have to hop off, your dog is bugging you, your kid is yelling at you to help with the math answer or whatever it is in this new abnormal, it's okay. We'll send this out within about 24 hours. And second, so we've got a really meaty deck packed with a lot of value, but we do these things for the community. So we want to make sure everything's relevant to your business, your organization, the problems you're going through right now. So if you have any questions, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom. I'll be kind of monitoring it. So if you have any relevant questions, please answer it in the Q&A. And we also love it when our registrants, community members interact with us. So it's a lot more fun when we know who we're hanging out with. So if you go on the chat feature, let us know your name, your title, what company you're joining us from. It makes it more engaging for us. But now that is out of the way, super quick introductions. I am joined by Randy DeHaan and JD Hague. Randy, JD, welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Scott.
Good to be here.
Looking forward to this combo. And I always kind of like to ask the superhero origin story of all the guests we have on this. So JD, let's start with you. How did you, get to become an SVP of sales and marketing at such a cool company?
Well, thanks. I think like a lot of folks, you have a circuitous route to getting to where you are sometimes. So I have a very different past of actually having been a faculty member, professor before I got into sales and marketing. And have really always been on the academic and education side of things, and sort of went from being a professor of classics at Austin College to being a sales rep for an academic publisher, and then sort of worked my way up through that, was at McGraw-Hill and Cengage, and then about 5 years ago came over to Cerego, and working for a startup, a small-ish was then, learning technology platform, and really from the ground up building a sales and marketing team has been really exciting. So yeah, it's been nice to have a lot of diversity in the background to bring into the space. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And I was learning all about Cerego right before we jumped on this call, and I'm kind of fascinated by behavioral psychology and all this stuff. So very cool tool. Go check it out. And the other thing I wanted to mention about your background there is I find more and more there's a lot of teachers that are getting into sales and having a tremendous amount of success. Josh Braun comes to my mind.
Yeah.
A gentleman we had at Outreach was one of our best BD managers. There's just so many kind of parallels there. Do you find you can draw a lot from your teaching background?
Absolutely, and we'll talk about this a little bit today as well. But I have found at least that one of the successful traits of a teacher is having a lot of empathy for the people you're teaching, and I think that's the same with sales. We have to have a lot of empathy for understanding where our prospects are in their buying journey, and so I think those things translate over very well. And you have to be a good listener. That's the big thing.
Totally, yeah, I love it. And moving on, last but definitely not least, Randy, let's hear the superhero origin story, my man.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Scott, and good to be alongside you, JD. My route into SaaS and sales also took a little bit of a winding path. I actually went to school for sport management, and I'm based in Boston. Got a job after school working full time in the Red Sox front office. So landed the dream job. Was there for 5 years full time in the Red Sox front office, and was running a team of about 40 to 50 people in sort of a non-traditional revenue generating role, very operational focus, but it was a startup within a much bigger organization. And as I was trying to turn a job into a career, I realized that the life that I wanted and the outcomes that I wanted from working in sports were actually a little bit more aligned with a different industry. And so serendipitously got connected with early stage company out in Boston, Insight Squared. So similar sort of space as Chorus, and was a second sales hire. Worked my way up through the organization. Basically had 3 careers at that company: as a rep, as a manager, and then as a leader. And now, call it a decade or so later, I've been a practitioner and a sales leader. So I'm excited. I actually joined Chorus just about 100 days ago, but I've been a customer for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's good to kind of have a homecoming and hopefully pay forward some of the things I've learned today with the group.
I love it. Only 100 days ago, and I would say that's the equivalent of about 10 years, though. I think these last 100 days have been incredibly ups, downs, taxing. So
Yeah,
kudos to you. That's a crazy time to start.
Yeah, no joke. I started on March 2nd. We went fully remote lockdown on March 5th. So I had 3 full days in the office.
Wow.
So hectic time, but hey, that's why we gravitate to startups. Like, roll up your sleeves and get moving.
That's right.
Absolutely. And so we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about, this new abnormal that we're in. Of course, we got to bring it to light. And what we're going to talk about is the secret recipe to show extreme value to your new buyer, which is the CFO. And I've actually been talking a lot about this with a lot of sales leaders of how just heavily scrutinized every single deal that is going through right now is being scrutinized, and oftentimes right to the very, very top. Nothing is going past, nothing's getting signed without direct CFO authorization, which is new. Depending on how big your deal size was previously, the CFO is usually just maybe a box tick, or maybe not even. So we're going to walk through really 3 sections. So we're going to talk about the new buying process, what that means. We're all going to add our thoughts there. And then we're going to go and we're going to break down the recipe for extreme value, what that looks like, how to prove that hard ROI, not those just soft metrics that, in the old world, you kind of look back and you're like, how did that worked? Just those soft things. When the going's good, it's a little bit easier, much more difficult today. And then the last section is really like how we do it. So we'll try and get super, super tactical. And our promise to you, the listeners hanging out with us, is we're going to try and make sure that you leave with some really solid key takeaways. And I want you to hold us to that by digging into everything we say. But let's kick it off, man. Let's go to the new buying process. I alluded to what this sort of means right now, but this is, I think, a shift that is happening that is not, I don't think we're ever going back to the old way. Pandora's box is open. Buyers are now, their expectations are different, and we need to be ready for it. So, Randy, let's kind of dive into what we're talking about here in the new buying process.
Yeah, and Scott, I think you hit on an important point where I don't think we're going back anytime soon. We all have stories of like our grandparents or whatever, like people who came up in the Depression era, how they, don't trust banks and they keep their money in their mattress and this, that, and the other thing. The interesting thing about the environment we're in right now, I don't actually feel like we've regressed and gone backwards. I actually think that this situation has fast forwarded us into the future. whether that's being remote, whether things are more automated, getting your systems tuned more quickly. And, we sit in a really interesting position at Chorus where we're analyzing and recording just millions and millions of hours of customer facing conversations. So we have a research team and they've aggregated a lot of interesting data. And I thought just to kind of crystallize the problem and the challenge and the reason why we're talking about this is to just share it with a little bit of information. So I felt like I kind of had to nerd out a little bit to keep up with JD. So let's see what the graph shows. So first of all, this is all relative to the baseline. So before COVID, how have things changed? And in the last 3-4 months, CFOs are actually joining conversations 91% of the time more than they were prior to COVID-19. So I'll let that land for a second. I mean, it's a pretty significant change in how our buyers and our prospects are behaving. Not only you used to have to beg, borrow, and steal to get access to power, and now power is joining whether you're ready or not. So, we're going to talk a lot about preparation and how you can tool up and be ready for this. But, JD, when we were getting ready for this conversation, this sort of struck you in a way that might be worth just kind of spending a moment on.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's one of those things, like you said, it's like you want this early on when, in pre-COVID times, but now it's there and everybody's watching their budgets. Everybody is careful about where their spend is, right? Because there's uncertainty about exactly what this future, this new norm is like. And so, as we go through today and we look at the kinds of things that sales teams need to be doing, having this frame of mind is so important, and the preparation for it is different. You've got to be ready in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. Immediately what jumps to my head is that's maybe scary for some, maybe if you're less experienced, like, oh my goodness, I got to be really ready to answer those difficult questions. But, like you said, this is an incredible positive, right? Like no one can move a deal further faster than the CFO, really. So I think you can look at this as actually an incredibly positive outcome that has come from it. And Randy, quickly, I want to go to Manuel, who has a great clarifying question. And you might not have this on hand, but he's curious if you took into account when you pulled this data, average deal size for these CFO joining calls, or is this just an aggregate of kind of all the data that you have at Chorus?
Yeah, it's an aggregate. So we could definitely come back with some more specifics, but this is looking across all of the conversations. So it's sort of deal size agnostic. But it would be interesting if we could get sort of like an average deal value looking at, all of those conversations. So I could make something up, but in the absence of that, this is an average.
Yeah. Can't be making things up when the CFO's there, man.
Yeah.
What's up? And then one question, Rick, what's the sample size of this?
It's millions of conversations. I'd have to get the exact. I know we actually just crossed. I want to say the amount of hours of data that we've processed is measured in years, like 25 years
worth of conversations.
So the breadth is massive. But this is data that we're looking at leading up to February and then since February.
So cool. Awesome.
I can at least say anecdotally on this that for my sales team and the folks there, they've been surprised at how early on and how even at smaller deal sizes that the level of authority and looking at it so early on has changed so much. So even when it's a $10,000 ARR, even $5,000 ARR, companies are really looking at these things, right? I mean, obviously the bigger ones as well, where they always would, but even the small ones, every dollar matters a lot these days.
Yeah. I feel like it's almost been like a mandate. Like it doesn't even matter what size it is. It's like, we're not signing anything without this going through the CFO.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, just on that point, you mentioned every dollar matters. And this is another interesting, just aggregated stat. You can see over time kind of the ebb and flow of your buyers asking for more relief on payment. And this isn't just with new business. I mean, I can tell you from experience, customers are asking for forgiveness, trying to change payment terms. So this is looking at kind of the ebb and flow of 30-day payment terms versus more extended payment terms. It's actually starting to trend more back to the norm, back to positive, where people are kind of going back to industry expectation of like a net 30 payment. But where this is sort of the new normal, we should be prepared that this is part of that give and take that's going to happen maybe even sooner in a conversation. And, Scott, you mentioned a moment ago that it actually might be a gift that CFOs were getting access and it's happening earlier. Like no one can move a deal like a CFO. No one can also stonewall your deal like a CFO as well. So, we're going to talk about how you can prepare and make sure that you're kind of presenting yourself and your business and your sales approach to speak to that persona. But this is a glimpse around the corner of maybe some of the conversations that are coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so looking at this, trying to like summarize this data is, COVID hit, people are asking for a lot of concessions, longer payment terms, and then it goes and kind of hits a peak, and we're seeing it slowly come back to normal. Is that a fair summary?
If you think about it, I think really regardless of what geo you're in, at least in North America, you've been in COVID proper for 3 months, plus or minus a week on either side. Like in Boston where I sit, it was really like mid-March. So we just hit the true 3-month mark, like just, yesterday, today. But you can see where COVID really starts to impact people in March through April. There's a ton of uncertainty. And now in May, we can start to get our grip on what the reality is, the light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully. Things are starting to normalize.
JD, you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was thinking about that. Is this going to, go back to some kind of normal from before? And I don't think it is. I think when you're scrutinizing, again, looking at some of the comments that folks are bringing in, when you start scrutinizing the dollars, you don't start going back to, unscrutinizing them. And I do think it's a positive thing. And for us as salespeople, it's very good to get that early on, right? Because you get clarity on what the rules are up front, right? And where that is. And then when we, as we continue to talk today, when we think about that flexibility and how payment and our approach with the buyer can work, I think this is here to stay. I think this is something that people will, as Randy was saying, it's like, it's a future, it's fast forward. It's something that, we do and want to do in any cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Once you have that level of kind of insight into something, you're not going back. I look at, like, personally, once I started doing a budget, which don't ask how long it took me to do one, but once you actually start tracking it, you're never going to go back because you've seen the value of it and how much that can help your organization or you personally. So yeah, I agree.
I think we've got growth at all costs. That whole concept for high growth companies, growth at all costs is, man, going to be tough to come by. I think it's going to be growth with a plan, and this certainly speaks to that.
Totally. Yeah, that could be a whole webinar in and of itself. This idea of shifting to sustainable growth and what that means for entire structures of organizations. But maybe another day. Quickly, a question from Chad Spain. Chad, great question. And Chad says, I'm guessing there's financial scrutiny in an economic downturn. Aside from the obvious distance differences of COVID, would you expect it to go back to normal when the economy recovers like it did in 2009? So we've kind of hit on this. My particular opinion is we'll go slightly back to it, but we're not going to see a full swing back to how things were. I think a lot of these are here to stay. You can't put the cat back in the bag.
That's right.
JD, what are your thoughts? Same?
No, and not to be morbid about these things, but there are things on the horizon for the rest of this year that are going to be substantial. One of those is a potential second wave of the virus. And these are things that we have to watch for in terms of how it affects our economic environment and our sales process. We have a big election in the United States coming up. in November, which is going to be affecting the world in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of things yet to happen in this year. I mean, despite the stock market rallying around, what they see the future being around. So we just have to pay close attention to this. I don't think that normal that we might define otherwise is coming back soon.
Yeah. Randy, final thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'm aligned with you guys. I mean, I think even as we see the payment terms starting to get back to normal, the scrutiny is I think what will prevail, and that will manifest itself in any number of ways. So, cash flow might be slightly less of a concern, but if people aren't going back to the office, then there's going to be a security component that's going to be even more prevalent. And so we don't know what the next domino is going to be, but this is at least one data point that supports that things are different going forward.
Totally.
So this is the last of sort of the educational component here. But I do think it speaks to the point of how we respond to the current environment. So this is, again, looking at similar data as we talked about before, where sort of pre-COVID and now through COVID, on the sales side, on the sell side, how are we reacting? And you'll notice that directors and executives are joining calls 88, 72% of the time more than they were before. So CFOs are joining on the buyer side, and on the sell side, we are responding in kind with more executives, more sales leaders joining calls sooner.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, and we'll come into this a little bit later, but I know I encourage this with my folks, which is, the team effort early on is going to matter more than it ever has. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but seeing directors of sales and whatnot come in on the calls like that isn't surprising at all.
Mm-hmm.
Teamwork is a difference.
Yeah, this is huge. I mean, this in my eyes is just good selling. So I hope this doesn't change. I think more VPs, directors, managers should be jumping on way more calls. Something we believe pretty strongly on the outreach side. What is Max, our VP of Marketing, CEO of Sales Hacker, has a great line. Is losing alone is a fireable offense, and I love that. You can lose deals, that's fine, but if you're losing alone, that's an issue.
Yeah, I've always preached sales as a team sport. It's tough because you got individual leaderboards, but like sales is a team sport, and 5 heads, 10 heads, whatever is better than one. And I don't think that's ever been more true. I mean, the data supports it here. You gotta gang tackle your opportunities, put your best foot forward as quickly as you can to earn the next conversation and to earn progress.
Yeah. What's the best way, JD? I'll ask you this question. You're an SVP. Let's say I'm an individual contributor. I'm on this call. I have a leader that maybe traditionally doesn't join my calls, right? He may be great in one-on-ones, but how do you kind of encourage that from your leader, or start to build a culture that is more around team selling?
Well, I mean, I think in this context, and Cerego is now a fully remote working company as well. We weren't before, but we are now. And the tools you use to communicate become all that more important. And so that I made up a silly word. I call it teamship, right? So it's like friendship, but it's your team, and you guys are together. And it's just like you were saying, Randy. I mean, both of you, like, so I encourage over communication around the deals and where we're working on them. I encourage getting a variety of people involved in the conversation around it, so they can understand the complexity early in that. So my advice to everyone is over communicate, ask questions more about what you're doing early on in the call. And again, we'll talk about this more, but prep is everything, especially today. It's everything. And it's in the old days, it's the difference between an inside sales rep and a field rep, right? When you're a field rep, I used to do this in the old days, knocking on doors, actually knocking on doors and talking to people. You don't have at your disposal all the things, you just have you. But sometimes you're an inside rep and you're on the phone, you've got everything in front of you. You can look at stuff, you can feel more prepared. So, that's where people are now. So when you're on with them, they expect you to be prepared. And I think that's what this shows here.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Quick question before we move on to the next section, and this probably be just anecdotally from Randy and JD. Randy, I'll start with you. Are you seeing margins on deals coming down because of scrutiny and finance leaders getting in? Are they asking for more? Are you having to discount or give any sort of preferential pricing these days?
Yeah, I think so. Every company is taking a different stance on this. From Chorus's perspective, we're well funded, and so it's not like you need the cash in hand, but we're also trying to be reasonable. Discounting comes back to haunt you longer term, and so you want to make sure that you're holding true to your principles. But I think that there are a lot of creative ways to show partnership and potentially add value. So payment terms is one of the things that I think in this case goes a long way, because cash flow is a bigger concern in many cases more than price. And so we've coached our reps to ask people, like, is it a question about budget, or is it a question of cash flow? Which is a key distinction to make when people are asking you for a concession on price. Because finance can work with us to get creative about when we collect cash. It's really hard when you think about the lifetime value of the customer, or the ability to grow the account if you lock them in at a lower rate. It's just hard to recover from that. So I would encourage people to just think about how you can add value and get creative before you just give discount.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that. Like it's so true about the discounts early and how they haunt you, and being flexible up front about the cash flow versus the budget and whatnot. The one thing I will add to this though is, and I'm a huge believer in this, is that the better we are at showing value and what we can actually do for our prospects in terms of the problems we can solve for them, the less the money becomes an issue, because they're like, oh my gosh, you're solving a problem I have. I really need to have you. Once you're in that space, then you can have flexibility around the other things. And discounting is probably not going to be one of them. Maybe flexible payment terms, but
Totally. I love it. Goes in line with Todd Capone's transparent negotiation. He's got some good thoughts about that. So if you're running into discounting issues, go check out Todd Capone's transparency selling, and particularly the part on negotiation. All right, let's move on. All right, so let's go to the recipe for extreme value. How we're actually showcasing this. Again, JD, you just said it's all about showing that value. If you can show enough value, you don't have to worry about discounting. You don't have to worry about timeline. They'll want to get it done, and the CFO won't quite be as scary. So we'll break it into three sort of parts. Extreme prep, what that looks like. Reposition your value prop, because I think everyone, if you haven't already, get the right people in the room and basically have to rewrite your value prop for this new, I'm calling it new abnormal that we're in. And then have intentional conversations. So let's dive right in.
Yeah, so this topic was one that when JD and I first started talking about, how do we engage CFOs and what are we doing on the front lines or even at the executive level, like to me, one of the reasons why I actually gravitated towards inside sales at a really, early stage in my career is I can control three things as a seller. I can control my attitude, I can control my effort, and I can control my prep. And preparation for me, at least personally, has always been this like great equalizer. I'm not the most talented salesperson. I didn't go to school for sales or for business. So the thing that I can do is earn the right to the conversation, show that I did my part to not waste the person on the other end of the phone's time, and come with something that will be thought-provoking or interesting. So JD, I know that this certainly resonated and was aligned with your approach, but preparation, even though it's not like super sexy, right? Like the number one and 1A things that fall off for sales reps is prospecting and prep in a lot of cases. But man, I can't overstate enough. Like if you're trying to engage with a CFO and we know that the dynamic in a conversation is changing, you got to do your part long before you ever get on that call.
Yeah, you do. And everyone knows this. We know prep is important, but sometimes in the busyness of how we work from home now and other things, we might discount it a little bit, but getting in there and really understanding where not only the company is that you're working towards becoming a customer, but where the individual is. And if that's the CFO, find out more about them. We all know how to find people on LinkedIn and begin to understand them and engage them in ways that are meaningful. But what you want to do is you want to find that, find the story about the company, find the story about the person. Where are they today in their buying journey? And if you can tap into that, if that little extra work can help you find out exactly where they are in their buying journey, it's going to make all the difference. All the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love this first bullet point here, which is something I've been thinking about again and again. I think every seller and every leader just have this burned into their brain right now, is up level your conversation from use case to business case. So if we know that the CFO is looking at everything, well, what does the CFO care about? They care about things that affect the entire organization enterprise wide. So how is this going to affect the whole enterprise and not just, a team, a manager, an individual? You really have to be prepared to have that bigger conversation. Randy, this quote here, which I strongly agree with, you must be able to show 5 to 10x ROI. Is that coming from data? Is that just kind of anecdotal, what you see?
Yeah, it's anecdotal. It's more of a mindset, honestly, than it is based in data. But listen, I think if someone's looking at the cost of your technology relative to the value and it nets out to be roughly the same, they shouldn't buy it. Right? So when people start asking you for discounts, to JD's point a few moments ago, whether your technology is, 50K or 55 or 60K, like, does it really matter if you've shown that there's a 5x, 10x return on investment? Really, it shouldn't. So if you can take that objection off the table in how you frame the problem, and more importantly, probably the impact to their business, the rest of your sale just probably got a lot easier and a lot more efficient for you. And Scott, you brought up a point that I think is just worth just drilling in on for a second. CFOs are looking globally, like at a macro level, of how things have an impact across their business. If you imagine that you're selling, so let's even assume a CFO isn't on the call, you should be selling to the person you're speaking to, but positioning your product or your service as if you're talking to their boss's boss. So if you're talking to someone on the front lines, what's their director thinking? If you're talking to a director, what's the CRO thinking? If you're talking to a CRO, what's this C-suite, the CEO or the board thinking about? Because if they heard it from their boss, it will probably land with them a little bit more. And JD, I'm sure you have a lot more neuroscience behind that psychology, but it's, again, this stuff is just a bit of a mindset, less based in science, more just how you prepare for your conversation.
No, totally. It's like when we're kids and we want our parents to give us permission to do something. You have to know how to, you've learned how to say the things your parents want to hear. So, and I don't mean that flippantly, but it is, and it goes back to the prep again. You're understanding the company. Where are they? Where are they in their own growth cycle? Where are they in their efforts to grow in the market? And then where is that individual in the mix of all those things? And again, with the CFO level thing, you've got to be able to show, here's how we can come in and help you with the things you told me, and we'll get into more about how we do that in a little bit. But that prep work can be everything. And again, and I know everybody knows this, but it's so worth remembering, is that when you position yourself as a thing that can help them and get them where they want to be, it's a totally different conversation. It's a totally different conversation. And CFOs respond to that. They know, oh, you're hitting my bottom line. That's fantastic. How much do you cost? Oh, that's fine.
Totally. Someone, going back a little bit to the discounting thing, someone once told me, and I think it was a really smart way of positioning it, is, let's say you got an opportunity to invest in a seed round of a company, and the guy comes to you and says, hey, you're going to make 5 to 10x your money if you put in 5K. You're not gonna be trying to barter with them, because how much you're going to make. You're not going to try and get better terms. You're just going to say, shut up, take my money. So you have to kind of have that way of thinking when you're bringing these, and have that resolution to just stick with your guns. All right, let's quickly go to the community. We've got a great question. Michelle, thanks for the question. So Michelle says, our foot in the door happens best when a champion makes the introduction. How do we get our ROI tools in front of the execs when the internal champion doesn't have the bandwidth to facilitate those conversations? And Randy, I'll start with you. I'll say quickly, I think you need to prove more value to the champion, right? If the champion's not going to facilitate introductions, I don't think you've done a good enough job proving out the value and proving the value that's in it for them. They should be really wanting to take this initiative up top, because it's going to make them look like a rock star. Randy, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's a great question, Michelle. I mean, I think first of all, think about is your champion really a champion, or are they a coach? Because we use the word champion a lot. Your champion should be selling on your behalf. So you do need to test your champion. We're going to talk in a minute about like coaching your champion, because I think that that's an important thing in these sort of uncertain waters that we're in right now. But I would just encourage people to share with your champion what it's going to take, because you are an expert on getting your product bought. They are not the expert on how to evaluate and buy your technology. So, I think you need to lead them to water a bit there. Yeah, I mean, I get a little challenged by that question, because your champion probably wants to help you if you're setting them up for success. So how do we do that in a more thoughtful way? One tactic that I've used a lot is I'll ask a champion, what do you and I need to accomplish together so that you feel comfortable to introduce me to the other people that would need to be involved? And so I try to come around to their side of the table and just put it in their court. Like, what do we need to accomplish so that you will then go do the work and gain access to the rest of your buying team? Otherwise, we're never going to get past that person. We want to work with them.
I like that. Great advice. Anything to add there, JD?
The only thing I would say is that some things we're doing differently now in the last weeks and months that we haven't done as much before. And this can't apply to everybody, because not everybody has like either the tech solution or the approach in their sales process to do it. But we've done a lot more of try before you buy, a lot more of like, hey, let's work with you on not just maybe they're ROI calculators. There are things that are directionally impressive and sound good, but if you can have real data on change that you've done, and if you can do it in a short time, I know it's not easy, but if you can, for us at least, that's made a big difference. It's made a really big difference. So the champion's not only saying, hey, I've got these numbers that look great, but here we've used the software, we've used the product a little bit, we've done this thing, and here are the results from it. And that CFO, you almost can't argue with it if it's real. And so that'd be the only thing I'd throw in there. And again, not everybody can do it, but it's made a big difference for us.
Yeah, I love it. Great answers, gentlemen. Quick question, and then we'll move on. This is from Anonymous. How would you apply this to non-IT related sales? I mean, just about everything that we're talking about can be used across any industry. I would just maybe change the language depending on what you're selling a little bit. Use case to business case is still very relevant. C-suite, maybe it's not called the C-suite in your industry or whatever you're selling. Think just your decision makers, whatever council is together making that decision. And then the last one, make your software an essential service. Make your product or service an essential, a need to have, not a nice to have. Cool. Let's move on.
Yeah. So this is the second component to the recipe for success here. And I think a lot of us have gone through this exercise in some format over the last 90, 100 days of just rethinking what resonates right now. I can tell you from a perspective of Chorus, like one of our value propositions has always been coaching. Well, just as the same as preparation or prospecting goes by the wayside for reps, when a frontline manager or an executive is pressed and too busy, coaching is the first thing, the first thing that falls off the list. We all think we're coaching, but like jumping on and off a call and saying good job is not meaningful coaching. So I think just that as a food for thought. But there are a few things here that, like, if you can really nail it, it should have a meaningful impact. So we talked a bit about ROI and how you can quantify the outcome by implementing your solution or your partnership or your thought leadership. But JD, you brought up the second point on time to ROI, and that to me was such a light bulb moment where it's like, listen, I can show you a 5 to 10x return on investment, but a CFO probably cares about when we can see that impact. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts, and Scott, to the extent that you have an opinion, I think it'd be great to hang on this point.
Yeah, no, I can jump in on this quick. Again, it has a lot to do with the time that we're in, right? No, one week, 2 weeks, 3 months from now, there's still a lot of uncertainty around where a company might be, or where an industry might be, or where the world might be in things. So, it's part of that. I mean, yes, in every day, in a normal non-COVID world, yeah, time to ROI also matters too, but it really matters now, right? Because, it's like, I need this to happen pretty quick because I'm kind of not sure in 2 months if we're going to be doing the same stuff or not, right? And I think as salespeople, we can address that in our conversations with this. Like, look, we get it. I saw in either the chat or the QA, they're talking about mutually beneficial relationships. Absolutely. And that's what time can do in this. It's like, look, I get it. You need this to happen fast. Well, let's talk together. How can we accomplish that? And so I think that's a strong part of what the conversation can be about in the current moment.
Yeah. I'll just quickly, my 2 cents there is exactly kind of what you said at the beginning there, JD, is like everything is so uncertain. So no one's making long-term plans at this juncture, right? We're looking in terms of months now, not years like traditionally we would, because we don't know what's going to happen. Could it be a wave 2? Could it be wave 3? We don't know. So I think people need to see that immediate impact, or they're not going to be pushed to make a decision.
Yeah, and I don't think that means that you have to abandon what your legacy value prop has been. Like, I don't think that goes away. I think you just need to understand what moves the needle, what has an impact right now, and then all that other goodness, is sort of the sweating of the asset longer term that they're still going to love about the partnership. But what can you do right now where we just changed our whole strategy, how our business is structured, the environment is uncertain. That's the stuff that they care about today. The other stuff is great too. It just might not be the foot that you lead with.
That's right. Totally.
Cool. And just in the spirit of time, I want to get to the third component here, and we can always double back if people have questions. But this to me is critically important. We talked a lot about preparation and your messaging. One of the key skills that is really tough to master, which is why we're calling it out as something you have to be intentional about, is how you leverage your time when you're actually in the meeting. What are you trying to accomplish? How do you structure the call so that you can get out of it what you need to, and more importantly, so your prospect or your customer can get out of the call with what they need to feel confident? And so, we know we have 30 minutes or 60 minutes on a call with people. I'll tell you what, if you're not bringing it in the first 5 minutes, the person on the other end of the phone is probably just playing out the clock.
Yeah.
So being really thoughtful and intentional with your slideware, everybody's role in the conversation, being mindful of what they want to accomplish and how you help them get there is to me like paramount. Of all the things that we've covered today, this is maybe the thing that I would step away with, that like I would think before my next meeting, how am I structuring it so that we're having the most impact?
Great.
Yeah, I have like rules, but not really rules. I encourage the salesman, look, have 30-minute conversations. Book it for 30 minutes. Maybe it goes for 45, but like that time is valuable, and you have to do everything you can do in there. And I couldn't agree with you more. I would even say it's the first 3 or 4 minutes, even before the 5, like, because you know when a call is going well, and it starts out and maybe your first question, and again, we'll talk about this more, but your critical questions, right? Because someone had asked in the Q&A, like, is there any sales approach we should use and all this? I have a lot I could say about that, but ask the questions. Hey, thanks for getting on the call today. What's got you interested about our product? Just get right into it. Don't, and that's for a first call, let's say. I mean, so I couldn't agree more that the time spent is super important, and you got to get to it. You got to get to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned like get to it. I think one of the ways that you can get to it quickly and get people to open up to you and have like an honest dialogue is through that preparation. Show that you earn the right to ask real questions. Again, like I said, inside sales was always a big equalizer for me.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to show people, hey, I'm a good kid. I did my homework. I came prepared. I know about your business. I'm not going to waste your time. So in 60 seconds or less, this is the work I did before I ever asked you to have a conversation with me. Here's where I think we might want to focus today. Can I ask you about this? Now you've leveled the playing field.
Nice.
So, these topics are not in a vacuum. Like your prep leads to the ability to be really precise in the conversation. And then your value messaging is what ultimately kind of gets people hooked.
Yeah. So important. And also remember, your buyer is now more informed than ever before. So it's not, if they can find it on your website or on some free asset you have, that's not inherently that valuable, right? Like a lot of the buying criteria, they've done so much work by the time they talk to you. So we need to hear insights that are above and beyond what I can Google too.
Yeah, I did a corporate visions training not too long ago. And their stuff is like really simple but powerful. And one of the things that the proctor mentioned was your buyers don't want to know like what keeps them up at night. They don't care. They know what keeps them up at night. They want you to tell them what's going to keep them up at night in 6 months.
Totally. Yeah.
Now, right now, I would argue you have to accomplish both, which is why selling right now is like as sophisticated as it's ever been in this current environment. Like sellers are doing like heroes work right now. You not only have to sell people on like, here's what you're going to need in 6 months from now. You also need to hit them immediately with like, this is what you need right now. And I know why. But they are looking for your expertise. Like that's what separates you from the competition. Hey, people are being really thoughtful about their purchases. So every deal is competitive, whether you know it or not.
Yep. That was gold. I love it.
That was.
Cool. Should we get tactical, or are there questions?
Let's do it. Right. We've got some questions, but let's go tactical, and then we'll do like rapid fire Q&A at the end.
Cool. Let's do it. So this is based on what we've seen in our respective organizations, what we've seen across our customer bases. So we're going to try to break this down in terms of like before the call, and then how you execute on the call, and then after the call. So this is the before the call. How we actually prepare. What do we do to get ready for the fact that CFOs are involved more early and certainly more often? And JD, I'll let you touch on the first point, because I know that this is something that you've instrumented in your organization and something you really believe in.
Yeah. So this goes back to teamship that I mentioned before. But look, CRMs are tools; they don't sell, but they are places where communication can happen and good information can happen. So I make sure that. Especially for the reps, they've got all the information they've gathered so far about a particular prospect in the CRM, right? So, and the point is that they can pull in whoever they need on the team. Sometimes it's customer success. Well, let's get customer success in earlier on the call, maybe the second call or third call, even if it gets there. Show them what success is going to look like for them down the road. That can make a huge difference. Or let's get the technical lead in, because we can talk about integration and what that could really look like. And so, but if you don't have all that prep work done, if it's not there, and it has to be asynchronous like that, right? Because it's not like I can walk down the hall anymore and talk to, someone in the department, right? It's like it has to be somewhere. So to me, this is huge. But the bigger point is that it allows you to call on your team members to help you. You're not selling alone.
Yeah, pre-call prep. I remember one of my previous companies, we would ask the reps, and we automated it through the CRM. you had to do your pre-call prep within 24 hours of when the meeting was scheduled, not when the meeting is going to happen. But when the notes are fresh from whether you booked the meeting or from your BDR or from your marketing counterparts, while you have the time to do the appropriate research, we just had like 3 or 4 very specific fields that we asked people to fill out within a day of when the meeting was booked. So then they could step into that meeting fully prepared and aligned with whatever resources or assets they needed. And we talked about the second point, a minute or two ago. But I think coaching your champion. I mean, this speaks to I think it was Michelle who had the question. We know that CFOs are getting involved, so we should just call it out early. Like, hey, listen, if you are seriously considering making a software investment of any kind, we should probably think about a game plan together of what we need to accomplish for you to feel comfortable to loop in the rest of the buying team, including your CFO. Like, coach your champion on what the buying process is. Otherwise, you're gonna do a lot of work and wind up in pain when you think you have a deal coming in. And then the last point is, determine the key phrases that keep coming up. So one of the things that's been really, really valuable with our organization, and JD, I know you do this at Cerego, so you can certainly share your experience, but pipe in to your decision-making process the voice of the customer. What's actually happening on the conversations? Like, can you actually capture the context of the conversation and hear the objections that are coming up, or the impact statements that people are saying that are resonating, or your new value prop? Like, workshop it, bring in the feedback from the field so that you can rinse, repeat, refine, because you can't just set it and forget it. Right now, I can tell you at Chorus, we review conversations in our talk track on a weekly basis to make sure that it's consistent and it's working, or we change it like going into each following week. So I can't stress enough, like, you gotta listen to the feedback from the field. It's tough to do if your CRM isn't really set up to like capture that context, but somehow you have to capture that context.
Yeah, you totally do. And I could not agree more. If you're not reviewing your calls, if you're not listening to the words, you're not going to win. And the words matter, and what people are saying, how they're saying it, across what parts of the conversation they're saying it. And, when we do it, and we do ours every Friday morning, and we do them throughout the week too, but like, it's a group. We have CSs on there, marketing, my whole group's on there, the whole group's. And we pick the calls we're gonna look at, and we listen to the words. What are the words that high level folks in the organization are using as they're talking about where they are with things? How do we begin to leverage that in terms of our own critical questions we can ask, or our own kind of follow up? And we practice and we practice and we practice, because you only get better at something once you're reflective on it and you look for change, your own behavior change. So it's so key today. It's so key today to do this.
Yeah.
This is huge. And also, just one quick point on there. It's so important to understand the approaches that work, and then also use the language that your customers and prospects are using, and use that in your next conversation. It's so important for sales, success, even marketing. This can inform some of the copywriting you're doing on your website or email campaigns, all sorts of things. Super, super powerful there.
Yeah, in the language that you use and piping that back into your conversations, I mean, that leads to really thoughtful execution on the call. This is in no means a ranked list. These are just some thoughts and some quick wins on how you can really execute your calls in an intentional way. So we can kind of let the audience scan this for a moment, but little things, basic things that actually drive conversion, like having your camera on. Like, there's no such thing as field sales right now, but I can tell you that inside sales is dead. We are now all in-person sellers over Zoom. Mm-hmm. So make sure your camera's on, and to the best of your ability, like having a virtual background. Zoom actually did a study with us, I think a year or so ago, that showed that there was higher conversion stage to stage when there was a virtual background. Go figure. So like,
is your virtual background, by the way? Sorry to cut you off.
Great one.
Is it moving? This is the coolest thing, man.
It's a video, and I can't take any claim for it, but there's a small team of people that actually put together some like really choice Zoom backgrounds. at Chorus. So I snagged this. I didn't make it.
Pretty
But
badass.
my
I
internet
like
cat
it.
made
It's cool.
It's very cool. All right. Sorry, as you were.
No, I'd be curious for you guys. Like, what's jumping off the page at you guys here?
I think the movement is just interesting. It's something I think, you kind of get that novelty component because I've yet to, I don't think I've seen a moving background yet. So it just seems like a live, more energetic environment.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of good comments coming in, Randy, on the Zoom.
Can I tell you guys a very, very quick anecdote?
Yeah.
My first week on the job, I did a webinar. So this is back in March. And like literally stuff's crazy. Wasn't expecting to work from home. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Like this was not part of the plan. So I'm in the room I'm in right now is like a bit of a catch-all. Now it's my office. And I was on a webinar and I painted just the like 9 inches around the painting behind me to cover up the old wooden, like crappy 70s walls that are in the room that I'm in. I'm really fortunate to use a virtual background now, but I showed it on my first webinar just to show like, hey, stuff is crazy right now.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that people appreciate the background, but when I take off the background, like it's real life.
I love it.
Oh, someone saw that webinar. They're texting in.
You got fans.
That's awesome.
So you knew what you were in for then. To me, one of the other things that just like jumps off the page, and JD, you've talked about this, but like if you do the prep early, you can get the right people involved and have really specific roles, responsibilities. Like as a sales rep, you're the conductor of a symphony. So like use all the resources around you, give them roles, put people to work. The best deals that we're winning right now are the ones where multiple people are involved on our end and on the buyer side. So just plan for that.
Yeah. I would say too, I know we're getting to the top of the hour here, other things I would encourage people to keep thinking about in today's selling world, are when we talked about having conversations that show empathy, right? And that's not always easy. But to me, it comes back to, and people had asked about different industries, like how do I sell in higher ed where it's so impacted, or what sales approach should I use? For me, and what I tell my team is that it is, first of all, it's not about you, it's about them. Find out where they are. Ask the questions. Like be curious, find out more, be their supporter, build that valuable relationship. And one word I use is vulnerability. Be vulnerable yourself as you're coming in, but have them, how do you get them to become vulnerable about where they are in their buying process and to show you that, right? That's not always easy, but when they open up just a little bit and you begin to see where their issue is and where they're struggling, and they may not say it quite that way, but that's our job, right? We got to pull that out. How do you get that out of them? You're in a whole different space. Once they've opened up to you like that, you got to cherish that. You got to nurture that and grow it. And that's when you're going to start showing value. Oh, I can help with that. Oh, you can help me with that. Great. And all these other things, start to open up that we've talked about. That would be my big takeaway.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Cool. Why don't we just kind of organize our closing thoughts here? I'd love to make sure if there's time for final questions. But to me, like key takeaways, understand the environment that we're in right now. The game's changed, so make sure that you change. Preparation, like that is something you can control and it's super critical. And then seek to understand, like show impact, show that you've earned the right, and then genuinely be curious and help people align their initiatives with the value that your software, your company can bring.
Yeah. I love it. Awesome. Okay, let's do rapid fire questions. We got a minute, maybe a minute and a half. I'm just going to fire these out. We'll try and get through as many as we can. Some of them we've kind of covered. And by the way, if you want to connect with either John or Randy, here's their emails. I know LinkedIn is great too. And thanks again for Chorus for putting this together. Okay, here's one from Tanuja. This might be outside of our scope a little bit, but we'll give it a shot. How do you price a new product when launching in times like this? What should organizations take care of? So it sounds like they're launching a new product or maybe a new revenue stream for their organization. What should they be thinking about in times like this? JD, you mentioned something. This makes me think of what you said earlier about letting people kind of try before you buy. Might be a good time now to do some sort of freemium model, if possible, if it's a brand new product that's sort of not tested yet. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If that's an option in your industry, definitely look at that. But I'm gonna tell you, you have to understand what problem you solve and how big the pain is for it. The more you understand that for your ideal customer profile, whoever that is, and you might have, a whole set of them, you've got to understand what you're solving, because what you could run into is, well, here are all my competitors, or my so-called competitors. You may have your own category, but if they start thinking that, oh, you're like that, because you'll be stuck in their price category, which may be too low, which may be too high. I don't know, but you've got to find out what it's that whole painkiller versus vitamin. You don't want to be a vitamin. You solve a problem. What is the problem? How big is the pain? How big the pain is how you can charge, and you'll start to get there with that. You can look at your competitors or similar products in your area, but until you understand the pain, you're not going to know what you can do.
Agreed. Let's go one more. This is let's go. Which one are we going to go here? Okay. Randy, let's start with you. Michelle wants to know, do you have any suggestions for sales execs new to a particular industry who are selling a service, who don't have clientele, so doesn't have a book of business yet, during this time, trying to build up their business? Particularly, how do you increase response or callback rates?
Well, I think preparation is kind of the word of the day, so I would stick with that. Like, if you don't have a book of business and you're trying to break into a new market or a new category, whatever it is, you're trying to build your book, put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're trying to connect with. Be really thoughtful about your outreach. I think we're past the point where we need to lead with, "Hey, I hope you're safe and doing well." Like, that was the thing you had to do. I think people are kind of through that now. But I would be really intentional with my outreach. InMail is a great way to connect with people, complimenting people on some of the things that you've seen, asking them for feedback. So this is an awesome tip that somebody gave me recently. Joe Caprio from Reprise gave this to me recently, where he said, I'm reaching out to people on InMail and asking them for feedback to test my theory on how to speak to this category, this persona. People are getting back to him like crazy because everybody wants to be a thought leader. So I would use that as a tactic. And, if you're leaving someone a voicemail, they're not going to call you back. I would direct them to their inbox. 10 seconds. I sent you an email. I think you'll find it interesting. This is Michelle at my company. I'll talk to you over email. So just be really intentional and thoughtful and creative.
I love it. All right, we will wrap up there. We are 3 minutes over. Randy, JD, thanks so much for hanging out with me. And everyone, thanks for the great engagement. Lots of really awesome questions. Go connect with these two gentlemen, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.